Good morning, all. This is the second part of the History of English Literature series I am discussing with you. In the first part, I have dealt with the history of Anglo-Saxon literature. In this video, I will be covering from medieval age to early Renaissance. I hope you all will find it interesting. Welcome to the presentation. The Anglo Norman period or the Middle English period. The Middle English period spans the time from William, the Duke of Normandy's conquest of England in the Battle of Hastings in 1066 to the ascension of Henry Tudor in 1485. The poetry of this period may be classified into chronicles, religious and didactic poetry, and the romances. Chronicles. The Normans brought with them historical taste to England and created historical literature. Leomund's Brut, completed in 12,005, contains 30,000 lines narrating the landing of Brutus to the death of Cadwallader, the last of the native kings, and its main source is Wace's Brut de Angleterre, which is based on Geoffrey of Monmouth's History Regum Britanniae. Robert Manning of Brune's Story of England, published in 1338, and translation of a French work, The Manual of Sins, under the title Handling Sin, and Robert of Gloucester's Rhyming Chronicle are chronicles of the period. Religious and didactic poetry. Here is a list of the religious and didactic poetry of the period, and the major ones include the Ormulum, written by Ohm, the Owl and the Nightingale, written by an anonymous poet, the Cursor Mundi, and the Prick of Conscience by Richard Rolle of Hampole. Other miscellaneous poems include the Horizon to Our Lady, Genesis and Exodus, the Bestiary, the Moral Ode, the Proverbs of Alfred, and the Proverbs of Hending. There are some alliterative English poems: Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Pearl, Cleanness, and Patience. The romances. The romantic element was the essence of English literature from the Old English period. The medieval romance was a genre of French origin. The term Roman or romance was usually confined to a type of literary work written in languages derived from Latin, especially French. Later, it was applied to a work written in the vernacular as distinct from Latin. Then it came to refer to tales of heroic deeds and tales of love. The romances stand out in their use of alliteration and rhyme. Medieval romances are adapted from four large cycles of tales that centered round Alexander, Troy, Charlemagne, and Arthur. The main subject of these romances is of a martial and amatory nature. Second half of the 14th century or the age of Chaucer. So first of all, I will give a background to the age. This was a significant period in the literary history of England as it marks the advent of a new language and literature. The Hundred Years' War and the Wars of the Roses strengthened the spirit of national unity. For the first time, the English people felt the coexistence of a common language and literature. The East Midland speech had become the language of the capital city and of the universities. Age of Chaucer also witnessed a gradual decline of three medieval institutions: feudalism, chivalry, and knight-errantry. The Black Death and the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 led to social tension and unrest. The modern note was struck by a spirit of criticism, a deeper interest in man's individual affairs, and a reluctance to accept the established order. The romance lost its significance and the dramatic spirit came to dominate over the romantic ideal. The church still exerted its influence on men's thoughts and feelings, but its sway was weakened by the spirit of new learning. The Italian poets Petrarch and Boccaccio pioneered the revival of learning in the continent, and their influence infused the spirit of humanism in England. Geoffrey Chaucer. As we all know, he is the father of English poetry. He evolved from French and Italian literary traditions and art which was entirely English and solely his own. Chaucer's literary career has been divided into three phases. The first one is the French period. An ABC, a prayer to Virgin Mary, is the first of his extant poems. He translated some portions of the French work Roman de la Rose, an elaborate love allegory. He wrote the Book of Duchesse on the death of Blanche, John of Gaunt's wife. The second phase is the Italian period. It is noted for variety and new technical innovations in his poetry. Dante's Divine Comedy, Petrarch's sonnets, and Boccaccio's Decameron influenced Chaucer's poetry. The Parliament of Fowls, Troilus and Cresside, and The Legend of Good Women belong to this phase. And the third period is the English period. In this period, Chaucer became independent of foreign influences and wrote his monumental work, the Canterbury Tales. A few other poems of the period include Former Age, Fortune, Truth, Gentilesse, and The Lack of Steadfastness. He is indebted to Boccaccio for the general idea of the Canterbury Tales, though the work is essentially English. The composition of the general prologue to the tales is commonly associated with 1387. The Canterbury Tales is a collection of 24 tales in verse and prose, some incomplete, told as entertainment by a group of pilgrims riding from London to the shrine of Thomas a Becket at Canterbury. There were 29 pilgrims, including the poet, of every class of society in England who meet at Tabardin. So here is the list of the pilgrims in the prologue. And we have the host of the Tabardin, Harry Bailey, and the narrator Chaucer, plus the knight, the squire, the yeoman, the prioress, the monk, the friar, the merchant, the clerk, the sergeant of the law, the franklin, the tradesman, the cook, the shipman, the physician, the wife of Bath, the parson, the ploughman, the miller, the manciple, the reeve, the summoner, the pardoner, and the canon and canon's yeoman. And the two female pilgrims in the prologue are the prioress and the wife of Bath. The prioress or the nun, she is called as Madame Eglantine in the poem, and the wife of Bath is called as Alice. Style of writing. Chaucer's own Tale of Melibœus and the Parson's Tale are prose tales. The rest of the tales are composed in the decasyllabic or heroic couplet. Chaucer introduced 3 meters into poetry: the 8-syllable line, the 10-syllable line, and the 7-line stanza known as Rhyme Royal. Chaucer was the first great humorist and humanist, and as we all know, he was the first national poet of England. Now, William Langland and John Gower were the 2 other major poets of Chaucer's age. William Langland's The Vision of William concerning Pius the Plowman has great historical and literary significance. This poem appealed directly to common man. The poem describes a series of remarkable visions that passed before the poet-dreamer. This poem is considered as the best example of revival of Old English alliterative, rhymeless lines. John Gower wrote in 3 languages: Speculum Meditantis in French, Vox Clamantis in Latin, and Confessio Amantis in English. Prose in Chaucer's age. John of Trevisia translated Higden's Polychronicon from Latin in about 1387. Sir John Mandeville's Travels keeps its place as the first English prose classic. Chaucer has translated Consolation of Boethius in 1381, and the first translation of Bible is attributed to John Wycliffe. The 15th century, from the death of Chaucer to the Renaissance. The 100 years that followed Chaucer's death are the most barren in English literature. Chaucer was imitated both in England and Scotland. The English Chaucerians were Thomas Occleve, John Lydgate, Stephen Howes, John Skelton, Hugh de Camden, and Thomas Chester. Their works include The Regiment of Princes, The Complaint of Our Lady, and Occleve's Complaint by Thomas Occleve, then Story of Thieves, The Troy Book, John Lydgate, The Pastime of Pleasure, Stephen Howes, The Book of Colin Clout, John Skelton, Sidrac, Camden, and Lay of Sir Launfal, Chester. The Scottish Chaucerians. The best poetry of the 15th century was written by the Scottish Chaucerians. Their poems were characterized by the love of the wild nature and the love of colour. They put in the Scottish landscape. The major poets include James First, Robert Henryson, William Dunbar, Gavin Douglas, and Sir David Lindsay. Their works include King's Square by James First, The Testament of Cressys by Henryson, The Thistle and the Rose by Dunbar, The Palace of Honour by Douglas, and The Dream by Lindsay. Ballads. Ballad literature became immensely popular in the 15th century. Ballads were regarded as a variety of folk art communally produced. Over 300 of them in 1,300 versions have survived. Bishop Percy collected and published them for the first time in Relics of Ancient Popular Poetry. These ballads are of two types. First one is the folk ballad that shows some signs of group composition, and the second type is the minstrel ballad, which is an individual composition. The Battle of Otterburn, the Nut Brown Maid, and the numerous ballads of the Robin Hood cycle are some popular ballads. 15th century prose. The establishment of the printing press in 1476 by Caxton contributed much to the development of English prose. Reginald Peacock's Repressor of Overmuch Blaming of the Clergy and Book of Faith, Sir John Fortescue's The Difference Between an Absolute and Limited Monarchy, the Government of England, and the Paston Letters. Paston Letters is the correspondence of the Paston family in the English language that presents a realistic picture of English life from 1422 to 1509, which is also an example of writing epistolary prose. And Caxton made and printed 24 translations from French, Dutch, and Latin text. The Recital of the Histories of Troy and The Game and Play of Chess are his most remarkable translations. Then Sir Thomas Malory's memorable work, Morte d'Arthur, is a compilation of French romances dealing with different cycles of romances like that of King Arthur and his Round Table. To drama. The origin of drama is religious. It grew out of the liturgy or the religious ceremony of the church. The performers acted the life of Christ and gospel stories in dumb shows by a series of living pictures during Christmas and Easter. The bishops acted and the tropes were written mostly in Latin and French. The earliest mention of any dramatic representation in England referred to a performance of a Latin play in honor of Saint Catherine at Dunstable in about 1110. Now, Adam is the best known example of this type of play written in French in about 12th century. The development of dialogue and action into Latin playlets and the introduction of the vernacular plays happened gradually. The plays were written for performances within the church, and the actors were presumably the monks, the priests, and the choir boys in the service of the church. Drama attracted huge crowd on Christmas and Easter, and the church was not spacious enough to provide room for the spectators. This led to carrying out the performances in outside spaces and later moved to marketplace. The clergy were forbidden to act in the plays, and drama gradually broke away from the service of the church. Miracles and morality plays. The mystery and the miracle plays, which grew out of the liturgical drama, came into being in the 14th century. The mysteries dealt with subjects taken from the Bible, and the miracles with the lives of the saints. At the festival of Corpus Christi, miracle plays were represented by the trading guilds in all great towns in connected sequences or cycles and came to be known as Corpus Christi plays. There were 4 cycles of miracle plays from York, Chester, Wakefield, and Coventry. The morality plays were didactic and dealt in abstractions and allegory. The characters embodied certain qualities and types: sin, grace, repentance, perseverance, 7 deadly sins, good and bad angels, everyman, etc. Everyman is the best morality play. Interludes. The interludes flourished in the middle of the 16th century. It was a short play that introduced real characters such as citizens and friars and had set scenes, a new feature in the English drama. John Heywood was the most gifted writer of the interlude, who wrote The Four Ps and Johann. Rastel's A New Interlude and Medwall's Fulgens and Lucrece and Callisto Melibea are other interludes. Renaissance poetry. Renaissance was an intellectual rebirth. Sir Thomas White and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey's poems appeared in songs and sonnets known as the Tottel's Miscellany, bearing the name of its publisher. It was published in 1557 after the death of the poets and is the first landmark of early Renaissance poetry. White introduced sonnets following Petrarchan form with octave of 8 lines and sestet of 6 lines with the rhyming scheme ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. White is also the pioneer of personal or autobiographical poetry. Surrey modified the sonnet form to English use, making it a poem of 3 quatrains followed by a couplet with the rhyming scheme AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. Surrey was also the first poet to use blank verse in his translation of 2 books of Aeneid. Thomas Sackville was a great humanist who wrote the poem Induction for The Mirror for Magistrates. The Mirror for Magistrates is a collection of English poems from the Tudor period by various authors which retell the lives and the tragic ends of various historical figures. Renaissance prose. The prose writers of this period were educationists and reformers, or Oxford reformers since they went to Oxford University, rather than creative writers. So the educationists include Erasmus, whose famous work is Praise of Folly, and Sir Thomas More, Utopia, Roger Ascham, Taxophilus, Sir Thomas Eliot's Governor, and John Check's The Heart of Sedition. And the reformers, Sir John Tyndale, whose famous work is the translation of the Bible and also the Book of Common Prayer, Thomas Cranmer's The English Prayer Book, and Latimer's Sermon on the Plovers. Drama. Real beginning of English drama happened during this period. Nicholas Udall's Ralph Roister Doister, published in 1553, is the earliest extant English comedy. Gammer Gurton's Needle, written by an anonymous writer, is another comedy of the classical style. Early English tragedies were highly influenced by the Senecan pattern after the Roman playwright Seneca. Ferrex and Porrex or Gorboduc, written by Thomas Norton and Thomas Sackville, is the first English tragedy. Thomas Hughes' The Misfortunes of Arthur, Robert Wilmans' tragedy of Tancred and Gismund, and George Gascoigne's Jocasta are other tragedies of the period. Lamentable tragedy is mixed with pleasant mirth in tragic comedies which became romantic. Whetstone's Right Excellent and Famous History presents a lamentable tragedy. Richard Edwards' Damon and Pythias and R.B.'s Appius and Virginia are tragic comedies of the period. Early historical plays were The Troublesome Reign of John, King of England, Tragedy of Richard III, The Famous Victories of Henry V, and The Chronicle History of Lear. So here ends the second part of the series. I hope you'll wait for the third part. Thank you for your patient listening and have a good day.